Welcome to the Veterans Impact Show, where our commitment is to help, hope, and healing of our veteran family and our nation. I'm Jim Blythe, a U.S. Navy veteran and a certified senior advisor. Join us as we continue the mission of leadership and commitment to our communities and our great country. Why, you never know where we're going to go or who you're going to meet. We invite you to join in, plug in, and share in what we do. This is your Veterans Impact Show. Welcome aboard. Hey, I got to introduce my great partner, Cedric White, Minister, U.S. Navy veteran.
Yes,
you were a gunner's mate.
I was a gunner's mate missile tech.
I got to tell you, boom, boom, we got it made.
Got you covered.
Got you covered, yeah. I got to tell you, I need to thank DBTV Network. They just added us to several more channels to go out. So DBTV Network and AUN out in California, thank you for all you do for us. And thank you to my sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage and Symbiosis Integrative Health and Healing Thine Heart Ministries,
Yes,
which you are the minister of.
Yes, sir.
What a great deal. Today, we're going to go on a subject that for a lot of people is sort of touchy and a little bit difficult. And the reason I'm doing that is because suicide prevention is one of the big things that Cedric and I are into. What we've recently seen, for instance, in Las Vegas and New Orleans, were veterans who literally took some people out with them and committed suicide. But we've had an epidemic of suicide in this nation, and the VA has said that we have 21, 22 veterans a day committing suicide. And they're not counting some of the ones who are committing suicide with their prescription medicines. So it could be more than that. It's a real problem. But one of the other things that has come up is suicide is not just for military and veterans.
Exactly.
We're seeing a huge epidemic in children down as low as 8 years old.
We're seeing the numbers are terrible, Jim. We're at least 2,000 a year.
2,000 a year.
2,000 a year.
So I'd like to introduce you to United States Colonel Todd Dombroski, retired medical doctor in Fort Worth, an outstanding sports medicine doctor, and now a good friend of mine because I think we share a love of great food. So welcome, Todd, and how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's great to take care of the active duty folks from the joint base here. Being in the Army, I don't see any because there's no Army stationed here at our joint fighter base, but I do get to see a lot of the pilots, and they're great people, and all their support people and their families. It's nice to still be around. Missed that after I retired on April Fool's Day 2011 as an Army doc in 26 years, and made all the wars and saw a lot of suicide, unfortunately, when I got out, and even during the war when we were losing 3 a day to KIAs, killed in actions. But after the war ended, quote unquote, we've lost almost 79,000, depending on what statistic you look at. And so when I was tasked for the Chief of Staff of the Army to say, hey, you've got to get on board as the advisor to the current ops, how do we get this decrease in suicide, because we have too much. And when you lose 7,000 in both wars combined, and yet you lose almost 80,000 3 years later, or actually 7 years later, that's more than we lost in Vietnam, and that's not a good statistic. So that's why I've dedicated part of my practice into looking at different options for changing the way the computer works in your head. And if it was easy, I'd already got the Nobel Prize, and it's not. And we've got some technology that just come up on an FDA approval. We're very anxious to use that, and some other things we can talk about.
Todd, one of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand, because suicide has become so prevalent in such a way that people don't understand what's going on. And it's not just a breakdown of morals or a breakdown mentally. There's chemical changes going on. You and I were discussing this a few minutes ago. So would you kind of explain about the brain, what you were telling us about the brain, how that works, and how this is interfering or starting to create this problem with suicide. Please.
Well, and again, I don't propose to know exactly how someone commits suicide, okay, but I guess I can at least go down some of the physical mechanics that we've noted, and how that relates, we're still not sure. So if you look at the brain as a computer, you have both hardware, the actual nerves, and software. So if we think about, you've got over 100 billion nerve cells, and you've got actually more connections between those nerve cells than there are stars in the known universe. So, when we have our minister here, there really is a divine intervention of how many connections we make in our brain and our souls,
Right.
and how that all mind-body connection works and spiritual connection works. So when you have the hardware, it can change because you've worn a helmet a lot, and that can change some of the structures in your neck and head. We've noted that in our work with the NFL and also other professional football teams. When they get concussed, it's very similar to how a blast can concuss our soldiers. And a lot of our soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen, all the above. I'm not worried about the Space Force when it comes to concussions, but certainly everyone's at risk who's downrange. So you got the hardware that can change. You've got the software, because you do see things and react a certain way that you don't normally do in the civilian community. So when a bomb went off at the Boston Marathon, I was still in the Pentagon, and everyone went away from the blast, and yet we're trained as military folks to go toward the blast,
That's right.
to go opposite of what you would normally be in your software. And some of their software, though, the three women that were hurt and lost their limbs, I had our veterans go up and talk to them. Hey, do not be too upset, because we've got great prosthetics, and we can get you going. And so some of their angst and some of their software changes. How dare someone do this to me? I can get through that. And it's tough. It's tough in that one of the other things we've noticed in our troops coming back is, and I was one of those troops because I was downrange several times. I was sitting in downtown Baghdad and just saw a big blast blow up, just literally 100 meters from our green zone. And then they said, "Doc, it's time for you to go back home." And 24 hours later, I was back home, and I was watching the same blast on the TV.
Wow.
And so that whole shift in being in a combat zone and not having time to process, and not being on a ship for 30 days, much like we did in other conflicts, you don't get to process as much. And so you have to sort of process all that you've seen, which is very strange. And that can make someone more prone to having some thoughts that we are not, quote unquote, normal, but are normal for what they've experienced. Yeah, maybe too lengthy. Sorry.
No, so we're basically saying you're going to have you're going to have changes in the brain as a result of being downrange, being the recipient of some of the fun. You're also going to have changes in the brain because when your body goes into super stress mode, things happen chemically in your body. Now, typically, what has been prescribed, or what has been the treatment for people who have PTSD, who have pain, phantom limb pain,
Right.
Injuries and all that,
moral injury,
etc., are opioids, aren't they? Isn't that typically what's been prescribed?
That can be one of them. The other that was tried was some antipsychotics. It was antidepressant pills. I was ordered to take an antidepressant pill for 3 months after I got back. And I'm like, well, okay, even though I outrank the person, okay, I'll take it if that's what you recommend. And I did. It didn't do anything to me because I didn't have the changes. I don't think because I'd seen a lot of stressful things, but I'm a doctor and I'm kind of used to being in the emergency room where things aren't doing too good, or being on the field with the football players where they're getting injured. And so that wasn't as much of a change for me. But if you're 18 years old and you may not have found religion, it's harder to process things.
Right.
I'd like to say it was more chemical. And in my experience, I'm starting to get away from a chemical solution. I'm more now into what I would consider a electrical solution, and I like to call it the Edison medicine, which is kind of where I'm looking at that more and more. And one of those systems that we're using is called Vector, which is run by a PhD that I know, Didi Ashmore Rios. And I've used some of that equipment that's FDA approved. I've also used some other equipment from another company. That's Avazia. And sometimes you get too much action, too much electricity, essentially hypervigilant. Sometimes you don't get enough because that's changed for many reasons. Much like if you took your laptop and threw it down the stairs, your hard drive might be affected. Well, so then the baseline amount of electricity going through your laptop may not be the right amount. So how do we adjust that? And it's hard to adjust, those kinds of chemicals. But because we have electricity going through, it's electrochemicals. So we have to have chemicals that induce that. Or do we?
Yeah.
Maybe we could just go in and just give a straight alternating current. You're like, wait a minute. Alternating current, what kind of electricity do I have in my body? It's like, well, okay, so even the good reverend will know that an EKG is up and down.
Right.
It's
Right.
what they call alternating current. And it goes up and then down.
Right.
And okay, that's alternating current. Until recently, we had direct current going into the brain and other modalities to relax muscles and such. And so why would you speak German to someone who's from Russia? That may not be the best. Language. So let's at least get on the same language of alternating current if we're going to do any kind of electromagnetic therapies.
Well, I am very, very familiar. Excuse me for interrupting. I'm very familiar with the Vector because I'm a patient who has used the Vector, and I actually have a Vector, and we've gotten to be pretty good. So what it generally speaking does is a total body treatment, although it can be programmed to be specific areas of the body, but it increases blood flow and oxygenation of the blood. I'm a living example of that. And I have also sat in Symbios, who provides this service and uses the Vector, with guys who were suicidal. I had one guy that I actually took to my home and talked to him, and he was in Afghanistan. He was a squad leader, and he lost his squad. And there were only 3 of them, and he was one of the 3 that survived. And the other 2 guys came home to the States, and within a few weeks, they took their own lives. So the Vector then enabled him to get his mind right, enabled him to recover. And a lot of that has to do with blood flow. I'm also a certified senior advisor, and I know that dementia, because I've studied it a little bit, a lot of dementia, and especially right now, they're saying dementia is as a result of lack of blood flow. They're calling it a diabetic dementia in some cases. So what the Vector does by using acupuncture increases that blood flow and increases that. So it's a very, very logical, but it's very magical and mystical to people who don't understand it. And I'm not a medical professional. You are.
Well, and again, part of you need to control your emotions like you do in a war zone. You need to not get too excited. But when you have a technology that's been around for almost 6,000 years called acupuncture, can we use those certain areas of the body to stimulate not only what's happening in the blood vessels along those meridians, but also possibly what is the baseline alternating current? And there's, again, two systems that do that. And as a scientist, I'm a bit like Switzerland. I just want whatever works, and I want it, but I want to know how it works. And so we're photographing with either system the blood flow of the lower legs, which is very easy to monitor. We are looking at the way the baseline EEG is looking at, which is called theta waves, and we're looking at that. We're looking at too much stimulation of the sympathetics and not enough of the vagus nerve, which is both at the base of your neck, that don't always balance, especially after you've been to a war zone. So there's a couple different things we're looking at, and I think having some success with this one particular way of inserting that kind of alternating current, I think is really neat. But again, I think having a battle buddy that we didn't have when we came back, because we come back, we do our 30 days leave, and then people then get promoted. They go here, they go there. So now we're all split up. It's even worse with the National Guard and the reservists. And they go back, and they might be with a unit that no longer meets because they're not active duty. So we've got that to deal with too. And then there's we had a bunch of combat stress folks that were attached to the chaplains. Well, should they be attached to the chaplains, or should they be attached to medical? What's the right answer? And I think you need to have all three professionals working on that, and to include our chaplaincy in the military.
We're going to take a break in just a second and come back and focus on this, because one of the big things that I've seen, and I mentioned this earlier, is many of the medical professions as well as the VA prescribe a lot of opioids to try and help people. And all that's doing is masking the symptom, and it's not going in to really increase. It's just putting another chemical in the system. So when we come back, I'd like to talk a little bit more about that, and so that we can see this is what's being done today and it ain't working. And this is what we need to be doing, and it will work. So this is the Veterans Impact Show. I'm Jim Blythe and Cedric White. We're talking to Dr. Todd Dombroski. We'll be right back. Welcome back, and thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage, Healing Thine Hearts Ministry, and Symbios Integrative Health. Now, let's get back to this conversation. We're talking about suicide prevention, and how suicide is being treated. Mm-hmm. You have dealt with some of this, Cedric.
Yes.
In almost every case, weren't they on some sort of prescription medicine?
Unfortunately, and I'm not an MD like our guest here, but quite often we hear about a lot of prescription drugs, a lot of things that bounce from one drug to another, and with a level of frustration that continues just to build when there's no result from the drugs. Yeah. So that means a lot. And it's like, okay, what we're talking about today is an alternative and often very, very positively resulting way of dealing with some of the thoughts and some of the pains and some of the things that these guys deal with, aside from the opioids.
Yeah. Now, let me give you some background, because I am very familiar with this. One of the things that Dr. Ashmore met Dr. Dan Rhodes, who built the Vector, which is the machine primarily that we're talking about. And there are other machines. There are other things that are being done. All of this is known as integrative health. In other words, they're integrating traditional medicine with some of these practices. And the practice being done by Vector, which is basically using acupuncture in the meridians of the body, is no needles, no pins. It's all done by pads which are attached. So it's very Innovative, I guess you'd say.
Yeah,
Non-invasive.
Non-invasive. Thank you.
That's me right there because I hate needles. So the vector's for me. I'm a guy let's go for it.
Okay. Now, so part of the thing too is these chemicals. Dr. Ashmore was explaining to me about the hypothalamus and how this has an impact. So all of this treatment is basically medical supervised. That's why you're an MD, you do it. She has an MD, Dr. Townsend, in her office that is an old friend of yours. And so all of this is very safe and medically supervised and measured so that they know they're doing the right thing. They're doing it safe, in other words. Correct?
Sure. I mean, and we have FDA approvals, and it's not really approval, it's certified. So drugs are approved by the FDA. Medical devices are certified for safety and to some extent efficacy. But we don't have a real good, we have some theories, but we're not allowed to biopsy your brain after a treatment. And so we have to look at the results, and the results are that people feel better, they're more awake, they're more interactive, they're less hypervigilant, they're sleeping better, they're moving better. But when you've been banged up by a blast injury or even falling off the back of an MRAP, whatever, you're going to have some pain. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that's in the joint. So how do we regulate that? And we've got some other alternatives to some of the straight opioids. And that's another thing we're working on. So what we plan on doing in the near future is, now that we're changing our administrations, we're looking at proposing to have a center of excellence in complementary medicine for this particular PTSD, whether you have the D or not. I don't have PTSD. I just have the D. I'm just disillusioned on many occasions. But otherwise, I'm here to help veterans, and that's what I've dedicated at least half my practice to.
And you know, when we're helping veterans, and I say this all the time, a lot of people don't understand that. Veterans are a microcosm of our American population. Mm-hmm. And when it works for the veterans, it works for the whole nation. Also, 70% of all your medical professionals went through some training at the VA or in the military. Dr. Dombroski, you're one of them. You were trained in the military. So when you take an advancement and you take it forward for the military, you're taking it forward and proving it for our entire population across the board. So you could treat somebody who's not so much a veteran. You could treat the young lady or the young man who was physically and mentally abused throughout childhood and now got some wires loose and they're unhappy and they're having all kinds of problems. One of the big things you made a comment to that I observed and I felt was I didn't sleep as well at night. Now I sleep like a bear. And by having the increased blood flow in the brain, mm-hmm. it makes all the difference in the world. So there is a place for opioid drugs. There is a place for some of these things, but in a prolonged treatment, everything I've read and heard from people like you and Dr. Ashmore is you got to get off of it sometime. And that's a real problem. And this particular deal enables you to do that. Now, I was in the Navy. I was on aircraft carriers. I did get a chance to fly for a short time, but I got to tell you, I watched my pilots land and take off, and I don't see how those guys don't have all kinds of brain damage.
Well, and again, we have to look at what the damage is or isn't, and we still can't even do that. There's parts of the brain we can't MRI. There's parts of the brains we can't observe or get information from. So it's not the exacting science we'd like. Going back to having opioids and or having some antipsychotic medications, those really do hamper your life long term. And how can we get folks off of that and yet still treat their degenerative arthritis from way too many carrier landings, from way too many, putting a helmet on that weighs 5 pounds and putting a 5-pound night vision goggles on it, and with a 2-pound battery. So, next time you want to go home after you've had a nice meal, go ahead and throw an 8-pound weight on top of your head and see how much you like that.
Well, I tell you what.
So we're looking at, I still think a multitude of things, and I think that microcurrent therapy is really the key. But you don't go into battle with just one airplane, you go in with at least 4, if we're going to stick with the airplane model. We've got a lot of F-35s down here and a lot of great pilots, and I get to take care of them. So I can tell you that, they're doing pretty good.
You're taking care of my Navy pilots. All right, we're going to take a break to hear from our partners, and we'll be right back in just a minute talking with Dr. Todd Dombroski, sports medicine, U.S. Army medical doctor, and we're here bringing hope, health, and everything we can to bring our veterans and our nation back to health. This is Veterans Impact Show. Welcome back, and thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage, Healing Thine Hearts Ministry, and Symbios Integrative Health. Now, let's get back to this conversation. Dr. Dombroski, you have affiliated with Dr. Ashmore. Jordan, could we pull up that Symbios so people can see what it is and they can actually get some kind of idea about what we're talking about, that website? So I would greatly appreciate that. One of the things that I have observed with Symbios, and with that, if you'll go down, Todd, you'll see pain management. If you're in pain, you don't think clearly. And especially if you're taking any kind of prescription opioids, narcotics, any of these things, you're not thinking clearly. And what happens, for instance, in a family?
Right.
I mean, you focus on the family. You're a marriage management guy. When one of the partners ain't functioning right, what happens?
Well, it affects the entire family. If I'm not normal, if I'm not in my normal character, let's say, I may be very short, very temperamental with the children, very temperamental with my spouse, not making clear decisions, to the level of pain that we've seen. Quite often, people are willing to almost do anything to get that pain to go away. Right. And so trying to, as you said, trying to think clearly, trying to operate clearly becomes very difficult when 24 hours a day, I'm dealing with a level of pain. And so what we're talking about here is a way to cause that pain to subside.
And I think that Vector is one of several treatments. I know Pete Dimitri in Washington's got a foundation. They're looking on things. I had Dr. Benjamin Kligler of the VA, who is working within integrative medicine, and they're using acupuncture. They're not using the same kind of systems that we are. And then Dr. Ashmore, community care provider, probably treated about 1,000 veterans before there was an issue that has happened in the VA. And we're hoping that will be resolved with this new administration, because it was not pretty what they did. But let's talk about how we get people back on track. So, Dr. Dombroski, if somebody is in Dallas, Fort Worth, they can call you and they can seek treatment. And some of this is carried by insurance, some of it is not. I'm not in that as much as I probably need to be. But how can people get a hold of you? Where is your practice?
Well, my practice is not for veterans yet. I'm still trying to go through all the paperwork to get on. I was on a community of civilians that, when the old administration was minimized, and I'm trying to go through that paperwork. I'm certainly looking at trying to help Symbios create an environment that looks at all the options, not only with this vector microcurrent, with another microcurrent that works with just blocking pain nerves and joints. There's another pill that actually helps block some of the receptors so that you can't overdose or underdose, and helps you wean off. There's another working at peer-to-peer counseling. There's another. So I think it's very exciting, and I think you kind of have to stay tuned to this station because we're not quite ready yet. I've been talking to several of the folks that are still in D.C. that I know from the Pentagon that have moved on to other things, and they still want to help veterans because they are veterans. So I think I would keep on your station. Look at the Symbios setup. We're trying to get more stuff over here on the west side of DFW. We've got a lot of veterans out in Weatherford, Mineral Wells, folks out there, and also down south. So we're trying to look at those. And again, I'm not trying to plug my own practice. That's okay. I think that I don't have PTSD because I'm allowed to take the things I learned from all my military experience when it comes to tissue transplantation, when it comes to other things that we did, and then give that to my civilian counterparts. And that's what I've done through lectures and other things. We had your taxpayer dollars paid for the first transplant of human cadaver arms onto human soldiers, and they did great. And we've since had now dozens who can use their arms, that have the feeling, the 80% of their feeling back, 50% of their strength back by someone else's arm.
Wow.
And then now the dean retired from that practice of the surgery. Now he's the dean at UT Southwest. So we've got a lot of folks that have done some things in the past, thanks to your taxpayer dollars, and we continue to do those things. Just the pads on the helmets, I worked on that, and now they're used in national football. The different density of pads. We don't use straps anymore. I played high school football, and we used straps, and I got concussed once, and said, man, that's not fun. So how can I look at that again? But I think that the Symbios group and some of their political things will be rendered null and void soon, and let's keep on that. But let's keep looking at all the different aspects of treating folks that have some difficulty, i.e. peer-to-peer, i.e. Religious counselors will have access to that. And we're looking at doing not only veterans, but also people in the NFL Players Association, because again, they got concussed and they got stressed and strained, much like our military.
Yeah, and we're working with that, the NFL Players Association. We're also working with the Thin Blue Line. We're working with a very dear friend of yours and a good friend of mine, Sheriff Bill Wayburn in Tarrant County in Fort Worth, America's Sheriff. Yep. That's what he's known as. Do you know that?
I didn't know that.
He is an amazing guy. And
he is.
Yeah. And you've known him quite a while. I think, as a matter of fact, you're his doctor, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I can't confirm or deny who I've seen, due to HIPAA, but I've certainly seen a 6'3" gentleman with a handlebar mustache and a pearl handle 45 on his hip. So, yeah, that could possibly.
And he wears a big black hat, right?
It depends. Sometimes he wears white, sometimes he wears black. Sometimes, he's with equal opportunity on that and has done a great job. And we're even looking at helping some of his incarcerated military. He actually is allowed to have some of the military who want to be sectioned off have a little more autonomy and have more counseling, and because they know how to receive that. And so that's been very exciting that I've helped advise him on in one of the largest jails in the U.S.
Yeah,
they got 5 out of 7 awards last year. So great job by the sheriff and his deputies.
And so what we're doing is we're talking about that old line from Cool Hand Luke, get your mind right, boss. So by doing the things that relieve pain management, the things we're talking about, using the microcurrents, because I have seen it. I've experienced it myself. I had a bad knee. I now go to the gym and I do about an hour of cardio 5-6 days a week, which I couldn't do a year or so ago. These things work, and they work real well. And like you said, it's 6,000-year-old medicine, but now they're using microcurrents instead of needles and pins. And I've just seen amazing things. And when we talk about, and again, we're focused today on suicide prevention, but by the same token, if you can't cure the pain, if you can't stop the pain, then that's one of the things. If you're taking all kinds of opioids, and we have got a huge opioid crisis in this nation. I mean, it is unbelievable. Basically,
but I think it's something we haven't touched on. I'll interrupt you just a little bit.
Please.
In that we have to get back to the religious side of things. So you can't call your knee bad. That's a judgment. You know, you can call it painful, you can call it dysfunctional, but bad and good are only for those over the religious genre.
Right.
So you can't call it a bad knee. However, we're here to help get you stronger physically, mentally, emotionally, and we're using all the different aspects that we can use. But really, the point of the tip of the spear is everything from one of my Marine Corps brothers is this microcurrent therapy, and we're very excited to have that. And it's coming to an area near you real soon, because we'll have the politics out of the way soon.
Doc, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go.
Let me ask
please.
you a question in reference to, when we're talking about pain, we're talking about people with suicide ideologies. Of the number of, just say, vets that could utilize this type of treatment, what percentage would you say to date has actually received, the microcurrent therapy, or even knowledgeable of it?
The one microcurrent therapy is now in the GSA for the veterans, and that company is called Avasia, and they're out of Plano. The other microcurrent, again, that focuses on the meridians, Vector, which we mentioned, has treated over 2,000. But if we've had, almost 80,000 servicemen and women take their lives, obviously we're way behind on people that need access to these.
And that's the
types of
point I
therapies,
was
and
trying to make.
We're doing our best to get that going.
Right. That was the point I was trying to make. The number of just losses that we've had doesn't even compare to the number that are still in pain that could definitely use this therapy.
And the politics, you're right. The politics of what happened under the previous administration really, really hurt Symbiose, and we're coming back, something fierce. And they're a sponsor of ours, and I'm close friends with Dr. Ashmore, as well as you, Todd. I think this is.
I may be your doctor as well, but we can't discuss that either. But the bottom line is that I love the military, but you don't go into a war with just the infantry,
right?
And so you don't go into this multi-complex issue with just one particular microcurrent therapy. Mm-hmm. There's another one you can have as a backup. There's other chemicals, and you need some behavioral health. Right. From several different areas, whether it's peer-to-peer, whether it's religious or not. So you really need to attack this as you would a campaign in a war zone, multifactorial, and not that you have to do everything all at once, but to be able to have those other things that can really make it an all-encompassing thing to get it going. Because again, chronic pain, big factor. Depression, anxiety, big factor. Having had your wires broken.
Right. So you're talking about healing the whole person, spirit, soul, and body, getting every aspect, not just the physical aspect, not just the even the mental or emotional aspect, but the spiritual aspect as well. The entire person being healed and made whole.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's how we change this suicide problem and issue. You change the whole body, spirit,
soul, and body. That's it.
And I think that's important. And I know one of the things that Dr. Ashmore had were counselors. They're peer-to-peer type counselors. I've had the lady who headed that up for her, who was also a Marine, she did a phenomenal job on my program. As you know, if you've watched my program for quite a while, you know that Cedric and I really focus on this being healthy and what we can do. And Misty Ely brings the counseling part of the deal to it. Dr. Ashmore is bringing the technology and the use of the technology. And the key to the technology is not just what it does, but how it's used and how you apply it. Just like with acupuncture, if you've ever seen anything, they got needles sticking all over everywhere. Where they put the needles is what happens to affect things. And again, this is not something that's new. Not at all. The microcurrent technology is new, but this is 6,000-year-old medicine that's proven. And again, VA is working with it. It's called integrative medicine. We're working with it. I think that politics is going to get opened up, and we want veterans as well as civilians to be treated and to be helped. It's not, again, just battle situations. I talked with a lady who's one of my clients, and she has diabetes and she has foot problem, neuropathy. Again, this is a circulation problem. So the vector or these other things that you're talking about could increase that circulation. Cancer cannot survive in an oxygen-enriched body. We know that, correct, Todd?
Yeah. Well, not only that, we've even had extra oxygen given to some of our soldiers that didn't work out to the same level we would have liked, but certainly that. The other thing I want to look at, and that we're looking at in one of our proposals, is it's not just the good blood flow coming in, but you got to drain that tissue. And if you don't drain everything out of your brain, then the proteins start coming together called tau proteins, we think, and that's what makes some of the Alzheimer's diseases, as well as other ideations. And so we want to make sure we're going back and forth on all that. And again, it's a lot to do, but let's take what we learned downrange. Let's look at ways of seeing results. One of the things that I was tasked to do was make a thermometer for the brain. Well, when it's damaged, well, we can't really do that. But what can we look at? We can look at the blood flow to their tissue. We can look, or certainly their skin. We can look at their balance. We know that is the main issue that happens with the concussion. And so if you still got balance problems later on, did you have more damage to those connections than we thought? If you've got more arthritis, you've got more other changes, how can we get that going, and how can we get you stronger as well? Maybe you are lacking certain trace minerals, other components to that, and we're looking at making sure you get the right amount of good nutrition in you as well. So it's multifactorial, and
absolutely,
it's going to be tough, but we want to launch. We want to launch as soon as we can.
So my goal is to try and bring this nation back together, especially what happened after Vietnam when we came home. But in doing that, we want to provide help. We want to provide hope. We want to provide healing. We want to talk about all of these things that do it, but especially the ones that have had tremendous success. The Vector has had amazing success that I personally have seen and can testify to. And I want to get any and every veteran, as well as people, diabetes. If you get a diabetic ulcer, that's a death sentence. This thing has been able to eradicate all diabetic ulcers. So we're going to take our final break, and then we'll be right back to finish up with Dr. Todd Dombroski, amazing Army Colonel, great man. Stay with us. Welcome back, and thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage, Healing Thine Heart's Ministry, and Symbios Integrative Health. Now, let's get back to this conversation. I got to tell you, this has been one of the best conversations. And Cedric, I wanted to ask you, you see, you get phone calls all the time about people with suicide.
Yeah.
And it's not just military.
No.
Sometimes it's family abuse. Sometimes it's narcotics abuse. Sometimes it's alcohol abuse. All of these things affect our mind, our body, our health.
Right. there's a lot of things that happen just traumatic within the family that in years past they were literally ignored. They were considered small. If a child or a young teenager was to mention this is bothering me, the parent would just just poo-poo on it, for a lack of a better term. But now we're starting to see in our office more young people, more teens that are coming in. And the great thing is that parents are starting to realize, okay, they need help.
Yeah.
There's some help that's needed. We're starting to see first responders and vets that are opening up and saying, okay, I want to get help. I'm not trying, and we'll change the term. Okay, a lot of guys, I need you to fix me. Well, we don't fix you. That's not what we're here to do. We're not here to fix you, but we are here to help, to support, and hopefully provide a resource. What do we say? We want to help, provide hope, and provide healing. That's what we're here to do.
Now, people ask me, well, where can I go to get some resources? We put up the Symbios. Jordan, could you put up this opioid crisis PowerPoint? I want to show people we have an opioid crisis PowerPoint that was just developed, and I got the last part of it this morning. And as you can see, we can go through, let's see if we can go that way. Yeah, there we go. What opioids are and who is at risk. This is a huge part of the suicide problem is opioids. Matter of fact, opioids, especially fentanyl, has been used to finish it. Their $1.5 trillion cost annually, that's 4.5% of the gross national product. I'm sorry. And so you can see how this has gone up so dramatically. If you'd like to have this information, it's very short. It's a PowerPoint. If you get in touch with me, Jim at veteransimpactshow.com or 214-502-4600, we'll send this to you. And it talks about the vector therapy. And again, you can go to the Symbios website and see their product. Mm-hmm. There are other products. There are class 4 medical lasers that are very localized that can do a tremendous job to localize an instant pain right now. So this is something, if you want to know what we can do, here's a PowerPoint, you can have it. So Jordan, thank you. And if you'd put Symbios up real quick, I would appreciate that as well. And again, there's other things. So look into integrative health. It's important. It's not woo-woo. It's not crazy science. In many cases, what we're finding, and again, about 2,000, you said Dr. Dombroski, and I think that's about right, went through the doors of Symbios, and I have not heard one complaint. And I've seen suicide because their minds and bodies were doing great. They were out of pain. One guy had his last jump in the Army. He was a paratrooper, landed in a hole and busted up his legs. When he came into Symbios, he was using a walker. Now he can jog. He can't run, he can jog. I had the same problem. I messed up my knee. Something got awful. Now I can work the elliptical trainer, the recumbent bike. I can go on the treadmill. I don't run. One of the crazy things is I have early stages of prostate cancer. I went from 7 lesions to 2.
That's one.
Now, you can't say it's a cure. You can't say even chemotherapy is a cure for cancer because it's not. But you have to have a maintenance program. This could be part of the maintenance program to be able to help people stay alive. This is also part of the program, as Dr. Dombroski was saying, with counseling, with the appropriate drugs that are there. All of this together can stop suicide. Mm-hmm. Not just one thing, all of these things, and it's important. We have the Military Peer Network. A good friend of mine, Ginger Simonson, heads that up here in Denton County. It is amazing what military peers can do to help as well. So take a look, pay attention, and know that there is help out there. And if somebody basically is contemplating suicide, talking to you, that's what they're saying. Because I've been through 4 of these in my life, and I got to tell you, you know what's happening. So hope, help, many solutions. The number is 988 to call for suicide prevention. Dial 1 if you're a veteran. That's 988. That's the suicide hotline number. If you call it, press 1 and you'll connect immediately with a veteran. The VA is really on this and doing things. We're doing things in conjunction with community care and with the VA. And I'm also very, very thankful for our new president, the administration, and the people he's selecting and where he's going to be able to help us return not only our veterans, but our nation to come back together and get off of this opioid crisis. We got a terrible, terrible problem, and it's killing us. And we got to do something about it. So if you want that information I put up, contact me, Jim at veteransimpactshow.com. I think Cedric, you're at Cedric at veteransimpactshow.com as well. I got to tell you, we got to do something about it. We got to bring this nation back together, and we got to heal this nation. And I was so thrilled to see many of the people that are nominated and now being approved have that same passion to save our nation. So thank you. Cedric, we like to close with a prayer.
Yes, we do.
Would you close us, brother?
I'd be glad to. First of all, this time flies, and there's so much more to talk about, so we'll be back with you. And thank you, Dr. Todd, for joining us. Father God, in your name, we thank you for the information. We thank you for people like Dr. Todd and those who are looking to assist our people who are hurting, who need healing. And there are alternative methods so that we're not stuck on drugs. We're not going down a path that causes us to be suicidal. So we ask that you would help to heal us, spirit, soul, and body. Father God, not just individuals, but this entire country. Bring this country back to be one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In your mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Share this program. Share it to have hope. Share it to bring about healing. This is Veterans Impact Show.